Hey, hey! All right, it's happening once again. Some fun. And hello to people watching. Little Andre, how you doing? Shalom mishpacha. Hello, family. Q&A. Yes, it is going to be a Q&A. A couple of comments that I got in the last couple of days, yourself included, when we'll be opening with, well, here's the thing. The Nazarene Nazarite, Seth Hall, he asked me if I would once again make some informational videos, recreating the ones that hey, Shabbat Shalom Lisa, although it's Monday, but there is the idea of remembering the Shabbat every single day. And the days of the week are known as Rishon b'Shabbat, the first of Shabbos, the second of Shabbos, right? Sunday, Monday, because we need to remember the Shabbat even during the week. Well, Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. So, Seth Hall, Nazarene Nazarite, said that I should consider recreating the older informational videos that I started with some 3.5 years ago, because he said that he found me while researching the Nazarite vow on YouTube, and he found me because a lot of my videos, he said, popped up when he was searching. And so that prompted me to investigate on whether or not I still have any of my older videos, which I may have saved. And I found 130 videos that I had saved at the time in the first few months of broadcasting. So I will be re-uploading them in the next, I don't know. I don't know if YouTube has a limit on how many I can upload, a kind of time limit or video limit. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But I will be re-uploading in the next few days or coming days, however long it might take, 130 of my older videos. So look forward. I look forward to re-uploading them, and I look forward to maybe other people finding out information, because at the time I figured it's high time for a Nazarite channel, which is from somebody who's Hebrew, right? A Jew, because I didn't find a channel at the time which was devoted to. Hey, Eiler, hello. I didn't find at the time, 3.5 years ago, and prior to that, I didn't find a channel like dedicated to the Nazarite chip, and that's part of what prompted me to start this channel to begin with. Wait, where's my pillow? So I'm going to be doing that. Re-uploading 130 of my older videos from my first one on the nature of God and onward until, well, a few months into it. So look forward to that in the next, I don't know how long it might take, 130 videos coming of my older videos. All right, so let's blast this off with little Andre, who asks, does the written Torah, or does the Torah written in Hebrew mention the Messiah? Does the Torah command us to believe the Messiah or to believe in the Messiah? So I answered, the Torah mentions several priestly messiahs, but not anointed kings. There's this idea of kings being anointed, prophets being anointed, and the original Messiah, the original anointed ones, were the priests. Were at the time of the dedication of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan. Aaron and his sons were anointed, as were, right? Moses made the anointing oil, which is forbidden to recreate as such, as anointing oil. So there are allusions to this idea of a Messiah from Judah, and this we can see in the blessing which Jacob, his father, Judah's father, confers upon him towards the end of his life. It's not explicit, nothing explicit commands belief in an anointed one which, right, the Messiah. So the Torah mentions messiahs, plural, right, and one Messiah, which is the high priest, also one Messiah, which is a priest that is anointed before going into war, and he addresses the people before going into battle. Those are the ones that are mentioned, right? Priestly ones of the tribe of Levi, of the family of Aaron, of Aaron, but not the Messiah as we know him, the Mashiach ben David, the Messiah, son of David, the king who will, right, who will do whatever it is people say that Mashiach will do. The Rambam, Maimonides, in his 13 principles of faith, which is disputed but generally followed as something which is like a pillar of the Hebrew faith, the 13 principles of faith by Maimonides. Now, he didn't make these up. He sort of gathered them from previous sources, as far as I can remember. And there it mentions at the end, right, I believe in full faith in the coming of the Mashiach, of the Messiah, and even though it might take a while, right, I believe Says af al pi sheyitmahamea, even though it may sort of lag, I believe in his coming every day. And this was expanded on by people like Chabad, Hasidut Chabad, and different Hasidics, certainly in the Kabbalah, right? This idea of Nishmat Moshe Mashiach, the soul of Moses, Messiah, or Messiah Moses. But no, there is no specific commandment. I think in anybody all those people who enumerated the 613 commandments over the years, I don't think that there is an explicit commandment to believe in the Messiah. There is a commandment to anoint the priest and the priests, but not one king, Messiah, son of David, as it's known. And as we know, messiahs, priests, and prophets were anointed to different oils from different things under different circumstances, and there are halachas, right, rulings of law on how to carry that out. But there is no commandment, as far as I know, to believe in that in the Messiah. All right. So let's see. Wait. Okay. Oh, right. Let's see. Another question which little Andre asked is somebody that they call Chilul Shabbat. Chilul Shabbat means desecration of the Shabbos. A Mechalel Shabbat is somebody who is a desecrator of the Shabbat, right? He says somebody who doesn't keep the Shabbat, is it considered Chilul Shabbat, desecrating the Sabbath, just for looking at a screen? Am I a desecrator of the Shabbos just because I looked at a screen on Shabbat? And he says, some may consider it desecration of the Shabbat, but how can that be when somebody who carries a couch up and down his house is not desecrating the Shabbos? Where is the logic in that? So I told him, first of all, anything to do with electricity and screens is up for debate. There's the Orthodox rabbinic view, which is that at the time when electricity started to become a thing, it was a great debate. I've mentioned it in the past. Is electricity desecrating the Shabbos? And there are different forms of electricity, certain things um, which are gavra and grama, meaning something which is directly or indirectly causing a spark or lack thereof, right? But is still electricity. Is electricity fire? That whole thing having to do with fire and with the Shabbos. And so the rabbinic take on this traditionally is that electricity should not be turned right on or off by somebody who is keeping the Shabbat. Many people would consider it, rabbinites, right? People who keep Orthodox halacha would consider it desecrating the Shabbos. But I say it's up for debate. And the reason I say it's up for debate is because there is the dispute in halacha, even though traditionally, again, the rabbinic halacha was fairly clear on this, that it is desecrating the Shabbos. But it's up for debate because, like he says, it's illogical. Now, Shabbat and logic, it all comes down to the idea of what it is that it constitutes labor, right? There are 39 or 40 minus 1 labors of Shabbat which were carried out in the temple. Those things which were carried out in the temple on Shabbat were considered desecrating the Shabbos anywhere else. And based on those 39 labors, many sub-halachas and many different fathers and children, avot v'toladot, as they are known, came into being. The more technology advances, the more we are, or not we, because I'm not a man of halacha, nor am I a ruler, nor am I a rabbi, but I know that there are different disputes and different rulings by different people on what is it that would constitute desecrating the Shabbos. And because the Shabbos is a commandment and one of the 10 commandments, it's something that goes on. And many people would rather avoid they would rather avoid doing anything that might be desecrating the Shabbos, Chilul Shabbat, rather than doing it and finding out, let's say, retroactively that it was. And Rav Yosef, who was a Talmudic sage, right, after the time of the Second Temple, he said, Hilcheta rabta leshabta in Aramaic, which means many laws are there to the Sabbath. And it goes on and on and on. The thing is, you can always make things tighter and more constricted, but where is it that the line is actually crossed? This is still up for debate, and halacha as rabbinic halacha seeks to draw that line in the sand, but there are those who would, let's say, make kiddush, right, sanctify the Sabbath with wine or bread, and then after the sanctification of the Shabbos, after sanctifying it, turn on the screen. People who are more traditional, less traditional, who keep more or less halacha. Electricity, if we're talking like thousands of years ago, right? Electricity is a fairly new advancement in technology, which is why it was an issue and a problem and people rather now avoid doing it, right? Rather, they avoid it rather than doing it. And I did that for many years, and I still avoid screens. And my reason is also quite logical and practical, which is I communicate through screens, I entertain myself with screens, I work with screens every single day. And on Shabbat, I choose very consciously to avoid looking at screens, turning things on and off directly, unless there's a great need, and the nature of which is changes from circumstance to circumstance, right? Different conditions. But I choose to avoid it for a very practical reason that I think one day of abstinence from electricity and screens can do a lot of good for me personally, and many other people agree with me. So it's up for debate, but I'm not the one who's going to debate it because I'm not a man of halacha, and I usually don't debate. I discuss, but I don't debate. I told little Andre to have a debate means that you use reason and logic and sound arguments in order to prove a point. But I have no point to prove, nor do I consider myself really with any kind of solid argument for this or that halachically, because I'm not a man of halacha, and I wouldn't pretend to know that this is the truth and this is not. I am right, others are wrong. I've said this before. Everything that I have ever spouted in the old channel and this new channel could be wrong. I That's my point of right. That's my entry point. That's my beginning point. I might be exceptionally wrong, which is why I'm not telling anyone to follow my lead. I mean, I say this, I say that, I address this and that, but I'm not saying that anyone should follow my words, which is why I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a ruler on halacha. Little Andre continues and says, I don't believe somebody who watches pornography on Shabbos is desecrating the Shabbat either. If you have or are allowed to have sex with your wife on Shabbat, you're in any way or can't wait. You're not in any way or can see any way those things. So it's like he sort of he conflates actual physical relations with watching pornography on a screen. Now, pornography aside, it could have been anything on the screen, but he says if you're allowed to do it in practicality, you ought to be allowed, if I'm hearing him correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, little Andre, you're saying that there's no logic there. Now, there doesn't have to be logic necessarily on Shabbat, although one could certainly find it if that's what you're looking for. Let's see, one more question, and then I'll go to the chat and see if there's anything there. A question from, well, you know what? He didn't answer me. He didn't answer me if I could use this or mention his name, so I'll just say somebody in the chat, in the DMs, who said, speaking of the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter Hebrew name of God, he says the name. Is it from the words Haya, Hove, Yihyeh, which is was, is, and will be, just words, or do you get the vowels also from those words? Now we had a pretty lengthy discussion, and it was lovely, but I'm going to give you the gist. I said I think it's the other way around, where the name of Yod He Vav He is what begot the meaning, and not the other way around. The name and its traditional vowels as they appear in the Homage, the name as it appears with the vowels, without the vowels, in different arrangements with different vowels, the name begot the meaning, right? And all of the God's names, the bulk of the divine names in all their different arrangements and vowels and letters, most of them are the bulk of them are to be uttered, are not to be uttered, but to be meditated on and contemplated, right? In that sense, Yod He Vav He is not a classical word, right? Meaning to have a word is to express an idea, an object, a concept. Those are all things, right? Ideas, objects, concepts, they have to do with this world and the way that we perceive things. But the name of God, as we have it here in this world, Yod He Vav He, pronounced Adonai, it already should give you an idea of the duality of it, where it's looked at one way, read in your mind, let's say, in one way, but pronounced and uttered in a different way. And that has to do with the dual nature of the divine, right? Hidden and revealed, finite and infinite, in so far as it's revealed to human beings, living, breathing human beings in this world. Okay, so the different letters and punctuation marks are there to be considered and thought upon and meditated on and dwelled upon, but not uttered, most of the names which appear. All right, there are others. Oh, there was one more, a small one here. He also asked, what's your opinion of the art scroll Chumash? Now, I know of the art scroll Chumash. Many people use it, but I don't know. I haven't followed it, right, over the years, so I don't know, right? I asked him, do you mean the translation? I said, I don't have a translation because I don't follow the different translations. So I don't know if Art Scroll did I'm sure they did a fine job translating the Homage, right, the Torah, the written Torah, into English and probably other languages. But the Art Scroll Homage, I know that many people use it, but I don't use it regularly. I use my own Hebrew Homage or the scroll whenever I am at synagogue, and I have been many times, and I've read from the scroll and I've practiced with the scroll, which has no punctuation marks and which have no and no melody. That those are things which the human being brings into the picture. So I don't know. I have no opinion on the Art Scroll Chumash because I haven't read enough of it, but I know many, many people use it. All right, let's leave it at that. There were a couple of other questions, but let's leave it at that. So let's see. Hello, good people. Hello. So who's here? Who's here? Let's see. Who else is here? I said hello to Lisa, and I said hello to Eiler, and I said hello to Andre. Robert is here. Hello. Jeremiah 23:24. God being omnipresent. Oh, Ariel is here too. Yo, hello to you. Hello, hello. All right, so people, check out Jeremiah 23:24. Let's see. I'm just going to check this out quickly. Jeremiah 23. Let's see. Okay. God being omnipresent. Now, as I've said, I don't know God. All I know is how God reveals himself to me. And as such, the presence of God, what's called Shekhinah, and I've been asked about that as well, is still only a revelation. It's not God in and of itself. I don't know the nature of God. It's all revelations. It's all the divine presence in one way or another. It's all about the different relationships between the names, the sphirot, and the way that we reveal divinity in the world, using those divine names, using those, right, the Torah, the commandments, the covenant. This is how we reveal Adonai to ourselves and to others. So it's something which you could say that the eyes of God, as it says, are everywhere, wandering the earth. And little Andre mentioned the Watchers, right? There's a choir of angels called the Watchers. Now, I don't recall if this is actual scripture in Hebrew, but I know that it's a known thing that there are the Watchers, and so God doesn't have to be everywhere because he has these spiritual messengers which give him the news, something along those lines. But those are still revelations of the divine, and that's how I see it. Let's see. Ah, you're live, says little Andre. Yes, I am. Little Andre says to Robert in Micha 5 verses 2 to 4, we read, "But you, Bethlehem Ephrata, though you are least, Tza'ir, among the clans of Yehudah, from you will come out the one who will rule for me, Adonai in Israel," his origins, i.e., his biblical source. Yes, it's true. There is a biblical source to Messiah. Biblical, but not necessarily Mosaic insofar as Mashiach ben David. But there is, let's say, look, Messiah at large has always been associated with the lower sphera of Malchut. Well, lower after, right now it's considered the lower sphera. That's not where it will end up, let's put it that way. That's a revelation which will go higher. But let's put that aside right now. There is the Mashiach. There are many Meshichim, and there are many potential Messiahs out there at this very moment, waiting to be recognized, anointed, throned, right, crowned. And this is what I keep telling people asking me about the Messiah. Yes, there is a Messiah out there, but we are the ones who need to accept him. We are the ones who need to crown him a living, breathing human being of the line of David, not of the line of David. Again, that's up for debate because we know that there was the kingdom of Israel, right? Still in the exile of Assyria, Galut Ashur. And there are messiahs, potential messiahs from the kingdom of Judah, from the house of Judah, from the house of David. And it's still an ongoing thing. And we are meant to purify, cleanse ourselves with Torah, with commandments, with adherence to the covenant in order to reveal that Messiah in the world, physical person, crowned to be king. And there might be many kings before the Messiah, capital The, shows up. We don't know how it will go down. We don't know about the Messianic age, specifically how it will go down, what will be. There are, again, the prophets, they give this and that, and nobody knows for sure. We will know when it happens. We will know when it happens. It's as simple as that, and I don't know when it will happen. I know that I would like to be around when Messiah is crowned, though it might come with great pain and suffering. And
let's leave it at that. Let's see. In the strength of Adonai, in the majesty of the name of Adonai, his Elohim, he quotes. But where is the quote from? Did I miss something, little Andre? I'm not sure. Robert Harrison says, Tanakh gives the birthplace of Messiah in Micha 5:2. Oh, and little Andre says, I'll leave the rest in the comments. Little Andre says to Robert, no, it does not. It does not give the birthplace of Messiah. It gives the origins of his father, David. The Messiah is called the branch of David, right? There will be this origin, which is thought of to be in King David. This is what different prophets said, but we know de facto that other people have been anointed. They weren't all from the house of David, and they didn't all bring this wonderful unification that's slated to happen later. And as I like to say, there's the idea of Messiah, and it's a unifying thing, but it's also a very dividing thing, and there's a lot of competition, let's say, and rivalry and negative things that are associated with it, right? The Messiah comes with the sword, and that might be problematic because we can also bypass that by being good people and bringing more positivity and goodness and righteousness and justice and truth and peace into the world. We will be able to make it so that those horrible wars and things, Megiddo, Armageddon, Gog Magog, all of those wars that are said that will happen, people being wiped out, entire nations. I don't know how it will go down, but I know that if we want it enough and if we orient ourselves enough and correct our ways, my ways more than anyone, because I'm talking about me, right? I don't know what other people might do. That might bring about a time when Mashiach won't be necessary because we will all, right? God will pour his spirit upon all flesh. You don't necessarily need to have the Messiah, although it's probably going to happen. The kings of Israel have always and ever stood, right? Israel, Judah, the people of Israel. And it might happen again. But we can make it, I believe, with our good deeds, with our adherence to the covenant, to the word of God, that we won't have to have that happen necessarily. And we'll be able to have that divine revelation come of its own accord because of what we do and how we conduct ourselves in the world. And Mashiach, right, someone who will rule, someone who will fight the wars and unify the people, build the temple, reveal God in the world in truth and in wholeness. That might happen. It might not happen that way. I don't know. So let's see. Lisa says, I have an art scroll Homage. I love mine. Okay, so you know what? Could you give us, Lisa, more information on the art scroll Homage as you understand it, as you know it? Do you think it's a good translation? If perhaps you read other translations that you could compare it to, what do you think of the art scroll Homage? If you can go into a bit more detail other than I love mine. It's wonderful that you love it. I don't know it enough. I've never used it regularly. I haven't used any art scroll books regularly, but I know that some people have said that they sort of slip in different things that were added later and call it Torah. Many people do that. I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I know that Art Scroll have many books and that people love their stuff and their work, their translations. So who am I to speak ill of it? Because I don't know it, but people who do, let me know. So Nazarite talk again tonight. What do you mean by that, little Andre? I'm not sure. So let's see. Little Andre says, Derech Agav, it's not Agar, it's Agav with a vet or a V. Derech Agav, by the way, if you only use the last two initials of your last two names, your surname and the second name, it's HN as well. That's right. That's right, it is. Robert says the last part of that verse proves divinity. Yes, there is divinity in Mashiach because the people are the ones who crown him, and divinity, ruler, right? A ruler, someone who has the kingship, someone who is crowned. That's like us crowning God every year over and over during Rosh Hashanah or the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets, or the Day of what's it called? What would be the better translation of Teruah? I don't recall. But traditionally, the time when we blow the shofar, when we stand in prayer, and when we welcome in the new year, not on Nisan, but the one on Tishrei, that's the one where God is crowned again. And that's also why there is no mention of sin, transgression. There's nothing to do with confession. That waits for 10 days and happens on Yom Kippur. a great day of atonement and confession and speaking of transgression and sin and what we ought. But Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, the first and second of Tishrei, that's what that's about. It's about remembrance, it's about the horn, the shofar, and it's about crowning God as king over all creation once again, accepting that God's divinity in our life, in our hearts, in our minds, in our conduct. And that is something which Mashiach reflects as Mashiach ben David, as Malchut, right? The kingdom. Let's see. Little Andre asks, and if you change your channel's name to Yiddish in Nazarite, then it's the same initials as your first two names. So I used to have a small thing that I called the Yiddish Rastaman. The Yiddish Rastaman was a very short-lived thing. Uh, I'll give you the gist of it. There was a project, I don't know if it's ongoing, I don't think it's ongoing anymore, called 929 Reading the Bible Together, where there are 929 chapters in the Bible. Now, the chapters of the Bible, of the Torah itself, were added later by Christians, but for whatever reason, the Hebrew people accepted the chapters as such. There is also the Hebrew way of counting the chapters, the parashiyot as they are known. It's not the same at all, but if you read a basic Bible, it has chapters in it which are not the original Hebrew ones. Those might be there as well on the side, but the mainstream chapters, as you know them, as I know them, are ones that I think Christians added and were accepted for whatever reason by the Hebrew people in later iterations or not iterations, later volumes of the Tanakh, of the Bible. So I had the Yiddish Rastaman. It was very short-lived. It was very short-lived. Let's keep it at that. But yeah. Robert says, is Israel a hard country to be vegan or vegan friendly? Negative. We have the most vegans per capita, if I'm not mistaken. Right, by population, we have the most vegans in the world, and I think Tel Aviv is the most densely populated vegan community in the world. Tons of restaurants. I don't go to Tel Aviv at all, but I know that there are many restaurants, and there are many restaurants and places, right, and eateries and food places, street food as well, which are vegan. So no, it's not hard at all. A lot of people, a lot of companies are understanding that veganism is not just a fad and it's not just a crazy notion. It's something that's a way of life, a diet, whatever reason you go vegan. If you do it in Israel, you'll have plenty of food to eat. Not all of it processed by any means. You'll have some good stuff, fruit and vegetation and yield of grain and stuff from the land of Israel is wonderful and plentiful, and there are many different things to do with the economy and things I know very little about, but I know that the fruit and vegetables of Israel and the grains and everything, the legumes, are all wonderful and blessed. We might not have everything, but we have a ton of things grown right here in the Holy Land and given to the people. So let's see. Oh, wait, did I miss my place? Oh, Pixie Face is here. Hello, Pixie Face. Robert, says little Andre, again, that's not what the Hebrew says, right? You know what? There are many translations. Some of them miss the mark. Some of them take great liberty and leniency with the Hebrew, and they allow certain things. Some of them probably have an agenda. I know that little Andre, I think it's little Andre, calls the King James Version the King James corruption. I know that there are different things that are translated that I've read personally, which I'm like, no, that's not what the Hebrew says. Or if it is kind of what the Hebrew says, it's one of several meanings of the word. Obviously, with a translation, you need to choose one and run with it, which is probably why there are so many different translations of the Bible. Pixie Face, what is the Jewish take on Antichrist? Daniel 11:36. I'm going to read that quickly. Daniel 11:36. I'm going to read from the JPS Tanakh if I can find it quickly. No, so I'll read from the from the New International Version. That's the one I have right here in front of me when I just put it into Google. Let's see, 36. Daniel 11:36. The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. So I have no idea what you mean by antichrist. If you're talking about people literally people, or a king, or a ruler, or somebody who makes himself higher, going against the anointed one. This has happened many times. Many times. Babylon did it. Assyria did it. Rome did it, right? If I'm not mistaken, were they anointed? Yes, they were anointed kings. The kings of the house of Hashmonai were anointed kings, and that was part of the downfall because they were priests. And while they were entitled to claim the kingship, being of the children of Israel, towards the end of the Second Temple era, even though Rome and Israel had a pretty tight relationship at first, it just went downhill relatively fast. And so I don't know about Antichrist as such, but those who go against the Mashiach, those have been around forever. That's my take on it. The Jewish take on it, I don't know. But I think that there will be, according to some prophets, there will be an anointed one, right? Maybe not the anointed one, but an anointed one who will be countered, who will be thought of as false, who will be waged war, right? War will be waged upon him, but eventually he will be triumphant. Something like that. But this is always what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, it says this has always been the case. If the people of Israel don't follow the commandments, don't adhere to the covenant, don't follow their path, they will there will be a downfall. It's what has always happened, which is why whenever you see specifically in the books of Moses, but even later with prophets telling them, look, if something bad is going on in your life, look to yourself first. If something bad is going to happen to Zion, to the people, if there will be exile, you can stop it. Look to yourself. How is it that you are conducting yourself? How is it that you are adhering or not adhering to the commandments? Look to your own faults before you go blaming others. Because you are the ones who will be able to right it and rectify it and go back to the right path and bring balance to the world, to yourselves, to the people, to the nation, to the world at large. The time of the temple was really, really weird. I can't even fathom it. But we know that even though the temple was there were a lot of rotten kings, a lot of good kings, and prophets who kept repeating the same thing. Choose each other in righteousness. Be kind to one another, right? To the widows, to the orphans, to the poor. It's like you can't have a society that's based on lies and war and bloodshed and infighting. You need to be kind to one another. And you need to do good things. And you need to listen to the Torah that you were given. It was given to you for a reason. Remember Moses. Remember the patriarchs. Follow in their footsteps. Figure out what it is that you need to do as individuals, as a nation, in order to right the wrongs. And then, as it says, what is it in Isaiah or Jeremiah? Right? And then Yerushalayim will be called Ir HaTzedek, the city of justice, Kiryane Emana, a faithful city, something like, or a loyal city, something along those lines. Let's see. Lisa says the Art Scroll Homage has the Hebrew translation along with the English reading and commentary from well-known rabbis and Rashi. Right, Rashi being the acronym for Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, was he around the 12th century in France, 12th or 13th? Or ninth. I'm confusing my sages here, but my rabbis. So, okay, rabbis and Rashi. It has picture of measurements and the types of kosher animals. Okay, perfect. So you can look at the Hebrew, look at the English, and actually have visual representations of what it is that the Bible or the Chumash, the Torah, is discussing. That's a very, very important thing. Growing up when I was in school, religious schools, right? I had a Humash, and I had different volumes of the different books of Moses. And at the end of it, you would have the very same thing, the outlines, the measurements, the different things, so you could see with your eyes that which you are reading. Now, thank God, with Machon HaMikdash, the Temple Institute, and I've said this before, I have seen with my eyes the golden menorah, right? The golden candle stand, and I've seen different things which are being prepared as we speak for the coming of the third temple, whenever it might be built, things that are waiting for the proper time. And Machon HaMikdash, I don't know a lot about them, but the Temple Institute I know is doing a lot of great things at this very moment to make the idea of a temple real, tangible, right, in the world today. And they are preparing like no one else, or, as a group. So it's nice. Thank you for elaborating on the Chumash, Lisa. I appreciate it. Robert says Herod asked the Pharisees where would Mashiach be born. They took him to Micha 5:2, and I'm sure the Pharisees read Hebrew. Well, look, there's in the Talmud. I don't remember who it was, who asked, I think it's one of the sages who asked Elijah the prophet, where is the Mashiach? And he said, Bikrach gdola sheberomi, in a great city of Rome, right? In one of the cities of Rome. So that's like a twofold thing. First, Mashiach is not necessarily where you would think he is. And second, Mashiach and the origins of Mashiach don't have to be from the land of Israel. Mashiach and the origins of Mashiach can be in some other place, and you can even see this with a Ruth, right? The great grandmother of Mashiach, right? Of David, great grandmother of David. No, two greats, and she was a Moabite, and it's disputed on whether or not she was allowed to convert. And they say a female is allowed to convert, but not a male. Second of all, we have Peretz, the son of Judah, from his union with Tamar, who was his daughter-in-law. And so it's from these, right? This near, almost incestuous sort of thing between a father and his daughter-in-law, and Ruth, which was of Moab. So we see that and Moab himself was an incestuous thing. The two daughters of Lot, one of them gave birth to Moab, the other one to Ammon. And it's like from these very unlikely and very unpopular, if you will, sort of connections and relationships, do these wondrous things come into being. And even though it starts off seemingly with not the best route, there is a possibility through tshuva, through returning to the Most High, of something with a bad root, or what could be perceived as a bad root, to yield great and amazing fruit. Now, most of the time, I'd say 99.9% of the time, the fruit tells of the root. If something is bad there, it means that the root might be iffy. On the other hand, we know that with a tree, you could have fruit where only the fruit. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. The root itself is fine, and it's a blessed thing, and it has to do with different circumstances and what the tree had undergone, and I don't know what. I don't understand. I don't know a lot about agriculture, but I know that you can have a righteously rooted tree with bad fruit. It can be done. It is possible. We see that all the time. This idea of bad fruit, as it's like the colloquial phrase, bad fruit, means that the root might be just fine, and there's just some bad fruit ruining it for everybody. Something along those lines. Let's see. Ooh, where am I? Okay. Oh, Pinky. Pinky. Hey, my woman is home. Hello, woman. Broadcasting. Hi there. All right, little Andre says, okay, so there's a guy who asked Nehemiah, right? Nehemiah Gordon, the Karaite rabbi, a sage, a scholar. Let's call him a scholar. I don't know if, he is. I think he's a Karaite rabbi. He says, why on earth would somebody take a Nazarite vow in a condescending way, if that's the right word to use? I wonder what he would do if he one day sees or finds out that Moshe himself was a Nazarite. Well, first of all, there is the idea of Moshe being a Nazarite. I don't think it says it explicitly, but there is a rabbi, a Nazarite that I met a few years ago, the first one that I met right here in Jerusalem, who said that all of the kings and all of the people at the time of Moses, all of the people he led through the desert were Nazarites. And we can see this, he says, it alludes to it when Moses says that you didn't have bread and you didn't drink wine all these 40 years. And he says they were all Nazarites. Again, not something which is explicitly written. But he says, that rabbi that I met with, he says that all of the righteous leaders were Nazarites, and all of the righteous rulers were Nazarites, and that's the way it ought to be. I didn't agree with him fully, but I can understand where he's coming from. And not to pat myself on the back or anything, but anyway, I can see his point, but I don't think that would be the case. Right? It's an individual vow. It's an individual sort of calling or something that someone is drawn to, and you cannot really say that all of the kings, all of the people, and the 600,000, let's say, that Israel, men at least, that God led out of that Moses led out of Egypt, were all Nazarites. But he claims that they were. Let's see. Lisa says, speaking of the art scroll Homage, it has pictures of the creation days. What was created on that day? It's filled with a lot of knowledge for beginning converts, I think, or anyone, but it definitely helps. I can see how that definitely helps. It was the best 40 or 50 bucks I've ever spent. Whew. That's saying a lot. Well, good for you, man. The Torah, you can't put a price on Torah. Lisa says, continuing, she says, I also have a JPS Tanakh and JPS Study Tanakh. So what is the JPS Study Tanakh? Well, I'm assuming it's one that has the JPS Tanakh and commentary. What kind of commentary? The people who wrote the JPS Tanakh, that was in the early 20th century. Is it their commentary, or is it ones that they sort of just accrued and brought together and grouped together? I wonder. So let me know if you can. Andre says, I once mentioned to you that I think most people back then might have been Nazarites, and that makes perfect sense if Moshe was their role model. I agree. It does make sense if Moshe was their role model that they would want to do it. It does make sense. On the other hand, there is that idea of yafli. It says isho ishaki yafli. In Numbers 6, there's this idea of wonderment, of pele, an acronym of Aleph, and there are many, many things to do with that, but I'll leave that aside. Yeah, it does make some sense, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that I know that they were all Nazarites, like for life or for certain periods of time, but it could very well be. Most people back then might have been Nazarites. Maybe, maybe. Lisa says the Sefaria app, now that is something that I have read. The Sefaria app, I definitely recommend to anyone and everyone. It has everything on it. Yeah, it really, really does have a ton. It's a wealth of knowledge, and it keeps on being updated, and a lot of good commentary, a lot of good translations. Again, I don't know them in relation to other translations, but everything, a lot of things from written Torah, oral Torah, midrash, a lot of books that were later written, Rambam, Ramban, a lot of great, great sources in Sefaria. So if you're into it, I suggest you do what Lisa says. Yeah, I recommend it too to anyone and everyone. Not even as a starting point. I use it, because I use it too, and it's a wonderful resource. Ariel says, would you support a program to add more pictures to the Torah? I suppose it depends on the pictures and on the drawings, the illustrations that you're talking about. Um, that's it. Would I support it? Yes, I would by and large support it because it helps to have a visual representation as you're reading along. And some things are unknown. There are certain things that are unknown or are in dispute on what it was. It's been thousands of years, thousands. And here we are trying to make sense of it or some sense of it and try and attribute, and try and get a sense of what it was. And having a visual aid can be really, really beneficial. That's been my experience. Let's see. Robert says, Jonathan, does this verse make you think John the Baptist was a Nazarite? Uh, where are you a Nazarite? You could tell me your opinion. Where you are a Nazarite, you could tell me your opinion of the verse, Luke 1:15, King James Version. Read, please. Now, I remember, I'm going to read it now, but I remember when I was reading the Old Testament for the first and only time I read it, and I got to the part where it speaks of John the Baptist and of what he was doing, I was like, yeah, that person sounds like a stand-up guy, and he could very well have been a Nazarite. So let's see. Luke 1:15, King James, for he shall be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink, and he shall be filled with the Holy Ghost, even from his mother's womb. Well, this immediately throws me to Samson. Samson was the same deal from the womb, right? Filled with that Spirit of God. It said that the Spirit of God started to kind of pulsate within him between the camps of Tzoave Eshtaol and the camp of Dan, right outside of Jerusalem. And he too did not drink wine, and he was forbidden to eat defiled things, right? And he was great in the sight of the Lord, and he delivered Israel from the Plishtim, from the Philistines at the time. So I can understand why that might be the case. Do I think he was? I have no idea. Could he have been? Most definitely. And we can see what's the word I'm looking for? Well, we can see the similarities between that person, right, John the Baptist, and Shimshon. We could see that for sure, but I don't know if he was or wasn't. Little Andre says, by the way, I see that guy as a traitor almost to the Karaite faith, Nehemiah Gordon, because after everything Nehemiah told him, that guy, not Nehemiah, because after everything Nehemiah told him, he still went to the other side because he has an obvious agenda, it seems, and he kicked me off his Facebook. Oh, whoops. I missed my spot. Oh, he kicked me off his Facebook group for asking how he can be a Jew if he celebrates the New Year of pagans. Interesting. Okay. Well, if you see him as a traitor to the Karaite faith and group, that's you. I'm not a Karaite. I have no idea what would constitute uh, treachery, right? What would be considered, who would be considered a traitor and who would not. So I don't know. Robert says the book of Yov or Yov. I don't know the book of Yov. I'm assuming you mean Yov, Job. The book of Yov, of what? What's Yov bad? I'm not sure what you mean. The book of Yov bad came on him, not through his doing. Wait, got a belch? No. I'm not sure what you mean, Robert, if you could clarify. So let's see. Ariel asks, also, do you know if the Torah is available in Braille or audio tape? It most definitely is, though I couldn't point you to an exact resource. I have, without a doubt, it's available on audio tape, that I know for sure. Is it, right, you could have it with reading, you could have it with the melody, right, the trup, right, the melody of the reading, as it's known in the different, right, the Ashkenazi reading, the Yemenite reading, the Sephardic reading. And if Braille, I'm sure it's in Braille. There have been many blind Hebrew people, so I'm sure. Robert Harrison says, will you tell us some of your wild dreams you've been having, Bivakasha? Well, they have to do, as I see it, with death and transformation. I had a weird one having to do with Star Wars. I had one having to do with me being in a war. I had one recently where it escapes me right now. Maybe I'll answer that if they come to me. I can't do it on the spot. Those are the few that I remember. But if not wild, then certainly a lot more vivid. Speaking of which, right, I'm in my dry January, abstaining from herb this month, and maybe later on as well. How is you? Are you doing any kind of dry January, be it from liquor, or any kind of other thing? What are you abstaining from this January, if you are? Tell me your New Year's resolutions if you're into it. And I know that it's a pagan or Christian New Year, Gregorian, right, or whatever, but you could still make good decisions and want to keep them regardless of the date and how you keep it. Forming good habits and making better decisions for oneself, for the future, for the present, is always a good decision. So do tell me if you have a dry January going on. How is it going? What it's about? Do it here, do it in the DMs, across the board. Hebrew Nazarite, look it up. And if you are if you're abstaining from anything, how's it going? And if you want to say anything else on this dry January, any New Year's resolutions or others that you've come to, that you've conceptualized, that you've started to implement, I'm interested. So let us know. So I will tell you some of those wild dreams when they come to me. Maybe I'll do it in a different video. Let's see. Robert Harrison says, why is there a lot of oral Torah instead of one? Well, because the oral traditions were ones that differed from tribe to tribe, from place to place. And when the halacha had to be written down at the time of after the Second Temple, right? And they had to write down the oral traditions, then it became one. Then it became halacha. But even afterwards, there are there are disputes on what exactly the halacha is. Different rabbis, different rulers, but halacha as it was then, when a Sanhedrin was around and was ruling, was one halacha. And at that time, when halacha was written down, at that time, all of those other opinions and all of those other traditions had to be put aside, if only for a time, in order for the people of Israel to have one path, one way. And when Rav Yosef Karo in Tzfat in the 17th century, when he came to write the Shulchan Aruch, which is what many, many people go with, he tried to take these opinions, those opinions. When the Rambam, Maimonides, wrote his Mishneh Torah, what's called Hayad HaChazaka, when he came to write that down, halacha, then it was something that he took from all of the Mishnah, all of the Talmud, the sages that preceded him, and he wrote down what the halacha was at the time. And he ruled, right, on halacha as well. Now, something like the 13 Principles of Faith, which are attributed to the Rambam, and which he wrote, I think, in the introduction to the Mishneh Torah, or one of the introductions to his books, if I'm not mistaken. That's something that he sort of grouped together and gave to the people. But these are not necessarily commandments. So halacha is a very wide thing. very vast and deep thing. Hey. And different rabbis nowadays who rule, poskim, right? A posek halacha, a ruler of halacha, they each have their own, and they draw inspiration and they draw wisdom from the sages of old and from the Mishnah, from the Talmud, from the Rambam, from so many of the commentaries and from the Shulchan Aruch. And that's what we have as far as halacha is concerned. It's in some ways very limited, but it's very vast. So it's a kind of twofold thing. That's why there are a lot of oral traditions instead of just one. The idea of writing down halacha was taking all of those oral traditions and making them into one written, ruled halacha by Sanhedrin. So let's see. Little Andre says, John the Immerser would also have made for a perfect hippie. I consider myself still somewhat of a hippie. By the way, he says this right here. Little Andre says, by the way, Jonathan is more liberal city hippie. I am a real hippie. Hey, no argument there. I don't consider myself a hippie is somebody who is aware. To be hip to something is to be aware of it. And so I strive to be a real hippie, to be really aware, still working on it, making plenty of mistakes along the way, taking, my time to understand different things, involve myself in different things, gain more knowledge, gain more wisdom, be educated. It's part of what I'm doing here, all in the name of awareness and self-awareness with a practical reasoning behind it, which is that I want to be more aware in order to know how to conduct myself and comport myself in this world. Torah, commandments, covenant, to be aware. Self-awareness, right? The truth sets us free. I'm hippier than thou art, says little Andre with a wink and a smile. He continues and says, maybe I'm a combination of both, though. One of those hippies who can get rather angry at protests and a free-spirited hippie. All right, maybe, because we all have our principles, right? We all have our pillars of what is it that we think. The beauty of it is, as I see it, is that you can change your mind. And you still need to have some pillars. Otherwise, I think that you would be lost because there is so much in this world. And certainly with postmodern sort of thinking and philosophy, when philosophers and different people claimed that it's now on us, right? Ever since the Age of Enlightenment, the Renaissance, that whole thing, it's on us now. The gods of old are dead. But we now must take their place and decide for ourselves how it is that we conduct ourselves. And we have no king. One thing that goes again and again and reiterates itself in the book of Judges. It's written again and again. And in those days there was no king in Israel, and each did in accordance with what they saw fit. And if we're gonna act the way we see fit, then we need to understand what it is that is fit and what it is that we are seeing. Sight. Right? We need to have our eyes and minds and ears open. So I think. Ariel says, how do people that don't believe in the oral Torah explain the contradiction between the 10 statements / commandments suggestion not to kill and the written Torah suggestion to kill everything? Well, I don't know how they explain it. You tell me. I studied halacha for many years. I still adhere to plenty of halacha. I just don't consider it to be as binding as I once did. But there is certainly wisdom there, and halacha draws almost at every turn, right? Mishnah, Talmud, it draws on verses from the Torah, expounds on them, and the 13 attributes by which the Torah is what's the word? The 13 attributes by which the Torah is studied and by which halacha is formed, according to at least one sage, and there are other attributes, but the main 13, and you can look those up, right? Shloshes midot, the 13 attributes by which the Torah is made into halacha and into midrash. Those are things which have stood the test of time insofar as halacha is still ruled using those attributes, using those methods, using those ways. And it's also part of the reason why Kabbalah and the Zohar specifically is not used in order to rule on halacha. That's part of the reason, as far as I know. So you tell me, good people out there, those watching now, those watching later, if you don't believe in the validity of oral Torah, at least in some way, and you say that it's just a bunch of crap that the rabbis spouted, how do you explain that contradiction? There is something of a contradiction sometimes. Now, I need to say this. The oral Torah that was written down, the Mishnah, the Talmud, it's not all halacha. The Mishnah is more than the Talmud. The Gemara, right, the Talmud has a lot of different things, a lot of myths, legends, sayings, teachings, which were not made into halacha. It's a great big grouping of a lot of a few hundred years of different sages commentating on the Mishnah. Every single part of the Talmud starts with the Mishnaic passage which it corresponds with. Starts with matnitin, we have learned, right? Or we were taught, citing the Tanaim, the sages of the Mishnah. The Mishnah always goes back to the Torah. And so the oral Torah is inherently connected, really interconnected with the written Torah. How do people explain it? I don't know. I don't know how they explain it. I know how I have my own explanations, but I don't know enough oral Torah, even after, well, forget even after. I wouldn't say that I know enough Mishnah and Talmud in order to have any kind of explanation. I love studying Mishnah. I like studying Talmud. It's been a long time since I've studied a page of Gemara. I'll give you that. And consciously, I'm doing that consciously, but I don't rule out going back to it in the future. And Mishnah is something that I do enjoy. It's written in Hebrew, which I love, whereas the Babylonian Talmud and the Aramaic one is, and the Jerusalem one as well, there's a lot of Aramaic involved. And I love Aramaic, Babylonian, Israeli, Syrian Aramaic. I love the language, but I haven't studied enough Gemara in order to give you the N explanation. But I have no doubt, no doubt that there was an oral tradition that was passed down what's the word? Well, not simultaneously, in parallel, let's say, with the written Torah. What about turning the Torah into a musical? Well, that's a great idea, and I'm sure many of them, many places and different verses and passages and parshiyot of the Torah have been turned into musicals. Ariel says, sorry, don't be sorry, just feeling a bit creative at this moment in time. Well, good for you. It's good to be creative. And there is nothing wrong with turning the Torah into a musical, seeing as how there is a melody, again, a tradition, a melody, a Masoretic tradition that involves music. The different trup, the different signs and signals of the music which accompanies every single word of the Torah is right there, handed down. See, you can tell that I'm speaking for almost an hour now with my voice starting to crack. So I'm going to stop soon. I'm fasting meat, says Robert Harrison. I'm fasting meat for 3 weeks. I'm vegetarian now and praying more to get my prayers answered. Hey, that's lovely. Good for you. I mean, I haven't had meat in so many years and I love it. I love the fact that I don't have meat. And if what I need to do is take B12 twice a week, so be it. As a precaution, I mean, so be it. You can get you can get pretty much all nutrients from nature. I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a physician, don't go by whatever I'm saying, I'm not a dietitian, but I know that you can pretty much get every single nutrient, essential and otherwise, from nature. And while you can get probably uh, greater amounts of it with animals and animal byproducts, you can also get it from nature. It's all a question of priority and it's a question of how you want to live your life. So I'm glad that you're abstaining from meat. I hope that it is beneficial for you. And it's wonderful that you're praying more. I hope that it's beneficial for you. Prayers are not for God, right? Because God doesn't need anything. He doesn't lack anything. The prayers are for us. When we think of prayer and when we verbalize prayer, be it the actual, prayers that were written down or spontaneous dialogue, itbodedut, it helps us to orient ourselves and refocus, recenter ourselves on what it is that is important to us in our lives. Because prayer, it's not just for things that we are lacking, that we are requesting, being like to be filled. It's also about where I want to be, what I want to do, how it is that I want to conduct myself in the world. It doesn't always need to come from lacking and wanting, in the sense of something needing to be filled. It's also about, oh my God, I have so much. How blessed, how wonderful. Where there's a teaching that says that if you say that you don't have anything, God says, you think this is not having anything? I'll show you what's not having anything. And if you say, "Oh God, oh Lord, I have so much," right, and you focus on the glass half full, God is like, "Oh, you think that this is a lot? Why, I'll show you what's having a lot," and He bestows upon you even more. Again, it's about the attitude. It's about how we move in the world, how we what we do with our being here in this physical, material, weird ass world, ha'olam hazeh, this world. Little Andre says to Ariel, "What do you mean? Poor man eating giants. Poor man eating giants? What? Did I miss something? I'm not sure what that means. But okay. Little Andre says to Ariel, I honestly have no idea what you're referring to about what you said about killing. Okay. Well, I'm sure he answers it. Maybe I'll get to it now because I'm going to stop soon. Ariel says, Robert says, Paula is doing a partial fast of technology and pizza. She loves pizza and soda. Oh my God. Back when I used to drink sodas, and back when I used to drink, to eat pizzas, right? Proper pizzas with cheese, there is nothing. People. Hear me now. There is absolutely nothing quite as good as pizza and beer. And I don't drink beer and I don't eat pizza any longer. But wow, what a combination. So good. So good. Ariel says about when the Israelites invade Canaan. Oh, I see. So the 7 nations that had to be wiped out. How do you reconcile the fact that the Torah says this and the Torah says that? I understand what you mean. Ariel continues and says, I know it just refers to one occasion. Okay, I hear you. Well, do discuss here in the chat or in the comments later. Little Andre says, by the way, it doesn't say not to kill in the Hebrew. It says not to murder. Correct? Lo tirtzach. And there's no mention of an oral law anywhere in the Tanakh. That's right. There is no mention of an oral law in the Tanakh. I definitely agree. And I still think that there was one that necessarily had to come down. So I think. Little Andre says, one doesn't say to murder an animal. Okay, it's true. Robert says, I just found out Haman cursed Bihem was an Amalekite. Yes, Haman ben Hamdata Agagi, right? Haman ben Hamdata the Agagite. Agag was the king of Amalek, which Shmuel beheaded or slit his throat in the Gilgal after King Saul failed to do so. I thought he was Persian. No, he was not. Little Andre says that's only for animals, right? This idea of killing and all that. He continues and says, at least there's no mention of an oral law as there is of the written Torah. Correct. But I know the arguments and they're not valid. They're not sound arguments. Okay. Again, you can think that. I don't go against anybody who says the oral law is not written in the Torah. The oral law is not written anywhere in the Tanakh. Ergo, it is not the word of God, not through his Moses the prophet, not through other prophets, not through any ruler, not through the people of the writings, right? Ezra, Nehemiah, and the rest who came back. And so it's not binding, it's not divine. Some go so far as to say it's a bunch of made up crap, and we should not attribute any kind of significance to it whatsoever. Now, what buttresses this argument in a big way is that, like I said, among all the very important and significant halacha, which is written in the Talmud, there are also myths and legends and stories and teachings and midrash and things which are not to do with halacha. And because of that, I can see how some people would say, look at this Gemara, look, it's full of crap, this makes no sense, it's a bunch of weird, superstitious garbage, and it's all trash. But that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And the baby, in this case, is very precious as far as I'm concerned because it deals with that oral tradition. And the oral tradition matters to those who would like to keep it. So it's true that what we are left with now is a whittled down and narrow view of halacha because all those other opinions and traditions were sort of written out of halacha as when it was ruled that, okay, we have this opinion, that opinion, A, B, C, D, here it is, this is halacha, we're following option C. And they had their reasons. And part of their reasoning had to do with the people. The Sanhedrin would not make a takana, they would not make a what would be the word for takana? Anyway, they would not pass a law that would not be kept by the people. Ezra, the priest in the time of the coming back from Zion, right at the time of the return from Zion, he tried to institute what's called the tvilah, the immersion in a mikveh in the morning for those who had sex at night. And he said that they could not perform this, that, or the other without being purified by a mikveh, and that did not stand. The people said, "Look, we can't follow this amendment," and so it was taken out. It's true; it did happen. Let's see. So I understand those who say that there is no sound and reasonable argument for oral Torah. But having studied the oral Torah that I did study and that I still do study, I can see a direct connection. Now, again, maybe it's me and my Orthodox upbringing. Maybe it's me seeing what I want to see. Fair enough, but I still see it. Am I going so? Will I go so far as to say that the halacha as we know it nowadays is exactly divine and the word of God and everything anybody with the title rabbi says is true and must be adhered to? Hell no. But is there an origin, a very real and true origin to the oral traditions? Yes, I'm going to say a resounding yes. But there is what was and there is what is, and I'm stuck there in the middle trying to make some trying to find my path through it. And many people would say, no, Yonatan, you're going about it the wrong way. You should trust the sages, trust the rabbis, trust that they know what they're talking about, blindly, with blind faith. Have faith in the rabbis and go for it. There was a time when I did, but I saw through my own lived experience, to cliche the thing, I know that it's not what I'm supposed to do. It's as simple as that. I saw that there is a great fault. I found it lacking. I found it wanting. But that's not to say that the root of oral traditions is false and fake and a bunch of crap. It's very significant. And just because we don't quite know what's going on with it now doesn't mean that I should completely throw it all out, which is why I'm not. Robert says, and I think I'll finish here because oh wait, you know what? There isn't that much more, so maybe I'll go. We'll see. In the chat, I mean, not that much more to go, but we'll see. Robert says, none of the lost tribes knew what oral Torah was. They only knew written Torah. And might I add, they was on Mount Sinai, when the Torah was given. They kept kosher and knew all about commandments. Yes, that's also very true. It's also very true. The different now, when you say lost tribes, I'm assuming A, you might mean the lost tribes of Israel. B, you might mean those Israelites that were discovered later on throughout history. And when they arrived at let's say, the state of Israel, or even way before the state of Israel, they had different notions of what the Torah was, but the written Torah was pretty much the same. Pretty much the same, which, well, it says a lot. I'll give you that. It does say a lot. And I still say that there was an oral tradition. It may have been warped. It may have been misrepresented, misquoted, censored. I don't know what. I don't know what. But I do know that there was an oral tradition as far as I'm concerned. Ariel Marshall says, my hero is far from perfect, so is mine. Little Andre, so I could be wrong. My Homage said not to kill. So yeah, it says lo tirtzach, thou shalt not murder. It says not to kill, and I have seen that translation in many sources. Robert exactly, says little Andre. So yeah, it says lo tirtzach. Retzach is murder. That's the origin, right? Resh tzadichet is the root of tirtzach, of murder, and that's what it says. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill. Robert Harrison says, but never heard of oral, plus oral Torah contradicts written Torah. So again, this is a great controversy. How can it contradict it? Because I'm not a man of halacha, I'm not going to stand and defend it here. I'm just going to say that there is an oral tradition, even though it may have been, again, warped, censored, changed, there is an oral tradition. It's up to me, as far as I'm concerned, as a Hebrew man trying to find my way, to find where I am in that position as well. That's just what I'm gonna say. Little Andre says, Ariel, okay, same here, not perfect either, but I know that Jonathan can also confirm. Yeah, which I just did. It's lo tirtzach. Robert Little Andre says, exactly, almost all of the time. Right, where there are contradictions. The Talmud, he says, even says to listen to the sages rather than the Torah in Eruvin. Well, that, first of all, Eruvin, that one is brought up all the time. All the time. That has to do with a specific case. That has to do with It has to do with following uh, the word of God. That's no, you know what? I'm not. I'm not. It's too late here right now, and I'm after like an hour and 10 minutes here. My mind isn't as sharp as it was, 70 minutes ago. So let's see. Pizza, says Robert Harrison. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna stop here. An hour and 10 minutes. I'm gonna stop here because if I can't sit here right now and discuss the contradictions between Torah and Halacha, or written Torah and oral Torah, if I can't do that properly, you can see I'm rubbing my eyes. So I'm sorry. Genuinely, I'm sorry. I have a lot to say about those contradictions. And again, I'm not here to defend them or necessarily claim that it's 100% true. I'm here to give my opinion, my very faulty opinion, my very flawed and fallible opinion, might I say again. Just my opinion, but I'm not going to do that right now. I will definitely love to address it later on, tomorrow or Wednesday or whenever I next go live. I'm just going to close with this, which people who are watching now maybe have missed, because it was at the beginning of the video. I'm just going to say it quickly. Prompted by Seth Hall, the Nazarite, I found in my old files, I found 130 videos which I recorded when I just started the channel. The first 130 videos, I found them on my hard drive here on this very laptop, and so I'm going to be uploading them in the next. I don't know how long it will take me, depending on YouTube's limitations and whatnot, on how many I can upload a day. I'm going to be re-uploading 130 of my original videos from the old channel. I had over 500 videos, right? So a fifth, just about a fifth, or even just over a fifth of my videos, the ones that I recorded, and maybe some of them that I even started going live, I'm going to upload them in the coming days. So if you're into my older stuff, informational videos, live streams, the first 130 videos that I did, I decided to save them. And at that point, I decided to stop. Now, I had my reasons. I wanted it to be more spontaneous and not have it saved anywhere, but have it exist only online. Maybe that was a mistake. But now, thank God, I have 130 videos that I kept. God willing, I will be uploading them soon, as soon as I can, really, to YouTube. Maybe on off days, maybe on days. I don't know the limitations of YouTube as far as uploading is concerned. So I guess I'll find that out along with you guys. But look forward to that. If you're interested in my older stuff, uh, look forward to seeing 130 more videos, the original 130 videos from 3.5 years ago that I will be uploading soon. Until then, I thank you deeply and sincerely. I thank you for the time, the patience, the ramblings of mine that you hear, that you listen. I hope I was of some value. I want to thank you for joining me here, as always, for being so kind, so patient, and educating me and sharpening me, right? Steel sharpens steel. Or is it iron sharpens iron, as they say, as it says in the Bible? Thank you for sharpening me up. Thank you for educating me. Thank you for providing me with the value that you do provide me with, without a doubt. I love it. I thank you. I will see you on the next broadcast, God willing, and in other videos which I will hopefully upload. Until then, let's have a wonderful night. God bless. Thanks again. Laila Tov.